What's up, guys? I'm Ryan with Ryan Epps Fishing. Got another clip for y'all today. Loaded up the boat Monday, headed out to the legendary Chickamauga Lake in Tennessee. And I'll tell you what, that lake, it fished pretty tough Monday. We got up there, had the rain from the hurricane had come in the week before. TVA had actually dropped the lake several feet. And we got hit with some pretty tough conditions, but nonetheless, we still put a few fish in the boat. Unfortunately, the camera wasn't on for several of them. So I'll tell you what I did. Don't worry. I've got some clips from June, actually. We went up there to Chickamauga and got on a little early post-spawn action, still some fish on some beds. So what I did was, in full disclosure, I merged those two clips together, and I've got some pretty good video of some fish catches for y'all today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a little fishing from Chickamauga. There we go. That's a better fish. Yeah, that's a better one. Oh,
They like that green.
yeah, they do.
I might have to change color. That's a nice fish, man. I need to get something that's wind rated. If I can find something cheap.
Oh God. Oh God. Oh, it's a big one. Oh, it's a big one. Oh God. Oh, come on. Really? That sucks.
I was excited. Damn.
Oh, I thought we had it. I thought we had it. Chickamauga giant. There he is.
There he is. Get him. Oh boy. Look at him. What do you got? 10 pounder. 2 pounder. That's a pounder. Come on,
Huh? Take a picture. Y'all, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know if I get any squirrel.
Did you see the size of that fish that took it in that log? He wrapped me around that log about 4 times and broke it. I can't believe it.
It's about 40 foot up in the trees.
I fish where they're at, you know.
Squirrel won't even go that high.
You'd be surprised how hard a squirrel can pull it. There he is. Finally. Persistence. I have been messing with this fish on this bed forever. That is a good fish. You will finally piss them off enough to bite it, or piss yourself off enough to leave. One of the two. She just broke before I did this time. All right, guys, let's talk about what worked today. Let's back up to June, and we'll cover that first. So, y'all saw the first clips there early in the morning. Pulled into a few spots, and at that point in the year, the grass was starting to get pretty thick. A lot of it hadn't reached the top yet, hadn't reached the surface. So, but it was really thick. So what happened was the fish were wanting to feed on top that morning, but the grass hadn't really set up for a frog bite, and they just wouldn't touch it. I did try that for a while, but they wanted none of it. So I had to come up with something else, and I pulled out a confidence bait of mine I've used since I was a kid. It is one of the best bass lures that has ever been made, and it's just a Zoom Super Fluke. This is albino color. What I did was I rigged this on a 4/0 VMC light worm hook, and I just rigged it weightless. Put it on a spinning setup. That's right, I pulled out a spinning setup at CHICKAMAUGA, and I'm not ashamed of it neither. I'll do whatever it takes to get fish in the boat. Rigging it weedless like that, it let me come through that grass and still fish a topwater style presentation. Y'all saw that I was fishing it pretty fast to keep that bait up to the surface, and that's just how they wanted it that day. I fished it in a lot of grass there that you just couldn't fish a walking style bait or a popper or anything like that effectively without getting it covered in grass and doing a lot of cussing. So a lot of the fish that day came off of this bait right here. Once the sun got up really high, it got hot, and this died off a little bit. So ran to some other places there, and something that I noticed all day back in June was a lot of the places that I was seeing fish, there was a lot of bluegill around, and it wasn't that the bluegill were on the beds, because I really didn't see any on beds. The bass were just hanging around them. The bluegill were schooled up there in the shallows. They were hanging around that grass, and the bass were just kind of hanging around them and picking off one or two when they wanted to. But the water was clear enough at that point that they were really skittish, and you really couldn't get a bait to any of them without spooking them. So I had to come up with something pretty sneaky, and it took me a while to get onto this that day, but what I ended up doing was I pulled out the spinning rod once again, and I got out the old Zoom trick worm. This is a green pumpkin with some purple and green flake in it, and it really matches a bluegill pattern really good. I got a drop shot hook, and the reason I went with the drop shot hook is I needed something that wasn't going to add weight, that much weight to the presentation. I needed something to sink really slow in front of those fish and not spook them. So this drop shot weight worked really good, and I just put a small split shot right there above it. And basically what I was doing was I was cruising those shallow flats in that grass, and those bass that had just finished up spawning and were still hanging around the shallows there before they made their way out to deeper water later in the month. It was clear enough that I was literally just putting the trolling motor on low and cruising around real slow and actually looking for them. And when I would see a bass, I would just kind of really easily pitch over out in front of it, maybe 10 foot or something, and this thing would sink really slow, give it a jerk or two, and when you rig it wacky style like this with that small amount of weight on it, when you move this bait, it actually glides a little bit. I don't know if you've ever watched bluegill, but when they move, a lot of times they just have that glide motion. And I caught a lot of fish that day in June doing this. And it was the only thing that I could throw at them that wouldn't spook them after they shut down on the Fluke. Another thing I got on that day was I found a patch of lily pads, and there were some bass in there around it. And at that point in the year, the lily pads hadn't gotten real thick, so you could still fish a moving lure in places of it where it was somewhat open. And what really did the trick there was a swim jig. You saw me talk about this Buckeye Lures G-Man Ballin' Out jig in my last video, and this just goes to show you how versatile this lure is. I have done nothing to this lure but add a Kitech swim bait to the back of it. That's it. That's it. I put a couple drops of glue on it to keep it on the hook. Now you got a swim jig. It swims great, and the bass love it. I was throwing this color right here. Again, it kind of looks like a bluegill. It's what they were feeding on that day, and some of my better fish that day came off of this. And up until this year, I've really had no confidence in a swim jig, but it's this jig right here that now it's one of the first things I'll pick up. So that put some key fish in the boat for me. The best fish of the day was the one you saw me catch on the bed there. And that was one of the few fish that I found left that were still on the bed. And this was on the upper end of the lake, and a lot of that was over. But I stumbled across that fish on the bed, and it took me forever to catch that fish. I will bet you that I spent a good 45 minutes on that fish to finally put it in the boat. But that was a Texas rigged Berkeley Pit Boss. It's kind of a white color here. It's white, silver, got a gray back. I chose that because it's a natural color, but the main reason that I chose it was the white and silver really contrasted, so when I was bed fishing and watching that thing drop on the beds, I could see the lure really easy. And that's about the only time I use this, to be honest with you. In fact, now I don't even have it in the boat. I take it out once spring's over. It's just not a color I usually throw. Moving ahead to Monday. Monday was really tough. Now, Monday, what I got hit with was the rain from the hurricane the week before. The water had muddied up significantly, and we're at that time of the year where the grass is dying off. And my plan was to run in a lot of those back coves and creeks and stuff on the upper end up there, and get on some isolated grass and stuff. But the problem was, where TVA's dropped the lake several foot, is I couldn't get into a lot of those places. And the ones that had enough water in them, the grass was so thick that you couldn't get back in there anyway. So I did find a couple spots that held some fish, and the bite was tough. They really only were really active for a few hours that morning. Couldn't get them to hit on a frog or anything really moving. So I put all that stuff down and went pretty simple. Got the Texas rig out. That's a 3/16 ounce weight, 4/0 VMC worm hook. And I got the Zoom Magnum Finesse worm and just went to slinging it. Dragging it on grass edges, dragging it on around the ends of laydowns right there in the creek channel and stuff, and throwing it up around boat docks. Anything that had some isolated grass around it. I fished it with this that day, and I ended up catching 7, and only 2 of them were keepers. That's how tough it was Monday. But this was the bait that did it. And as you can see in the video, I guess catfish like it too. I didn't know that, but that was a real bummer. So next time you're out there and having a pretty tough day, give some of these baits a try. If you like the videos, I'm planning on doing this. I'm going to try to on a regular basis, so go hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and we'll see you next time.